Welcome to the Laverne Church of the Brethren's weekly audio message. Here at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, we create a Christian community called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in our congregation. We believe in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people, nations, and faith traditions. We claim no creed but the New Testament as exemplified by the life of Christ. We strive to follow the way of Jesus. And through these efforts, we seek to grow ever closer to the mind and heart of God. And now let us ground ourselves as we enter into today's message. 2 weeks ago, a group of 13 learners from our congregation set out on a civil rights tour. From ages 4 to 54, we boarded a plane and landed in Atlanta, Georgia, where we met a group of 8 participants from Manchester Church of the Brethren. Together, we spent time in Atlanta, Montgomery, and Selma, deepening our understanding of the civil rights movement through museums, memorials, historic sites, contemplation, and discussion. We only brushed the surface of the movement, a movement that isn't over, a movement that continues today. Our worship service this morning will focus on lessons learned during our tour as we hear from a few who attended. Before we hear from several of the participants of the Civil Rights Tour, I just wanted to say that I'm proud and grateful for this congregation. I'm grateful that this church encouraged and supported such an immersive and formative experience for our youth, our children, and adults. We did not send people to another country to evangelize a specific theology. Instead, we created an opportunity where a group could further their education on racial injustice and become inspired to work toward justice here, today. In our tour, we visited the National Voting Rights Museum, walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, ate lunch in front of what was once the Confederate Capitol, stood outside the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church where King pastored, and time traveled at the Rosa Parks Museum. We walked through the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, where over 800 steel monuments stood to symbolize thousands of racial terror lynching victims in the United States. It was a full trip. The next few minutes of sharing cannot hold the depth and detail of everything that we learned and experienced, but be assured that we've returned changed, inspired, and motivated. Today we'll hear from Tommy and Antalia Allison, then E. Gonzalez and Jarrell Baker, and then finally from Nancy Flores. From the youngest to the oldest, we gain many lessons from Selma and beyond. Thanks be to God.
After places were horrible. Some places were beautiful. The people being locked up in chains was horrible.
When we went on the trip, I saw jelly bean jars where you had to guess how many were in the jelly bean jars and answer silly questions like how many bubbles are in a bar of soap. I don't think that's fair. If I were someone who was going to vote, but I had to do that test, I would just not vote, because if you guess it wrong, you don't get to vote anyway. And you're probably gonna get it wrong. It didn't make any sense to me because those things have nothing to do with voting, and everyone should be allowed to vote because it's voting. I didn't like that.
All right. We live in a time where there are people who like to see history change, but we can change textbooks, but we cannot change the history. But we can take actions today that can make changes for the future. This is why this entire trip has been so important to me. For me, on the second day of the trip, we went to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a bridge named after a Confederate general who was a leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Edmund Pettus is cemented in history, but our American history is so unique that that same bridge later, a guy named MLK marched on that. Someone who would take life away and freedom was MLK, began his journey for freedom. In 1965, the bridge was a part of the Selma to Montgomery March, and also were those who were eager, enraged in the fight for freedom, were brutalized for taking a stand. Yet today, we are in a better place because of their bravery and sacrifice. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. Later, the bridge was officially recognized as a landmark in 2013. From MLK fighting for rights, including voting, to the election of Barack Obama, history has always been being made, and the future is always being changed. Let's continue to stand what is right and continue moving in the direction that great leaders have set on us. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to share about my experience on the Civil Rights Tour. And I'm going to be sharing about the impact from the Legacy Museum. The legacy that this museum presents is that of slavery and the men, women, and children that were denied justice for years and years and years because of it. To me, the most moving part of this museum was an art installation that's a memorial to all the people who were kidnapped and trafficked, and they died on the Atlantic slave trade route. The memorial is a full room that you walk through with projectors and sounds, making it feel like you are watching the bottom of the ocean, with the busts of people who were killed over this route, so kind of surrounding the room. I don't think I can describe it very well because it's one of the things that you have to see, but I'm so grateful that I got to see it because I can't quite tell why it was so moving, but it was. It was the type of thing that can give you a deeper understanding of the absolute tragedy that is the history of this country and the feelings that it conveys. The artist who was able to he was able to show so much sorrow on his sculptures, and I find that absolutely incredible, the way it's able to give you perspective to history. And part of the reason I'm so glad I got to go is because that perspective, you're not able to get that from school or speeches or the internet. You're not able to learn the way we were able to learn on the trip just by school and going about your day normally. So I really feel that this place was important to me for learning, and I feel that this learning needs to be important to us as a congregation and a community, because we need to be a justice-driven community, and this learning will help us along that path. So, thanks. Bye.
Hi, guys. It's hard to follow those two guys. That was incredible. As much as I would ask them during the trip, what do you think? What do you feel? It's okay, it's okay. And then we get all this. That was fabulous. So I'm a nerd. I like to learn things. And I'm like, sure, yeah, I'll go. We'll see what it's about. Amanda asked me what I wanted to speak about. And I'm like, I'll speak about anything, because everything was fabulous. So whatever's left, I will do. But in honesty, what I chose was the most powerful for me. We went to the Center for Civil Rights and Human Rights Museum, and they had an immersive simulation of a sit-in, as was done at Woolworth's, lunch counter. So they had you sit at a counter, put on headphones, close your eyes, and put your hands on the counter. And then, you know how like in movie theaters, like they'll put sound in one ear and then the other one, it was kind of weird. So I'm sitting there, and the first voice is, oh, it's your first time? Take a deep breath, it'll be fine. Just don't move, and we'll get through it. And then sounds started going in my ear. People taunting, calling names, threatening, on and on and on. They had the chair moving, like if somebody was like pushing you, like if you were there. It was 3 minutes, and when I finished, I just had to walk off and collect myself, because that's crazy. They were just sitting there. So I consider myself to be kind of involved. You know, I've gone on the Women's Rights March, and I went on a Black Lives Matter march. And of course I think of myself, gosh, if I was around during World War II, of course I would hide Jewish people from the Nazis. Of course I would. During civil rights, of course I believe I would, volunteer on a sit-in or be a freedom rider. And if I saw someone getting abused on the street, of course I believe that I would go and, jump in and try to assist. But would I? Folks in World War II were killed for hiding Jewish citizens. Folks at the sit-ins were beaten. And what if I did help someone getting abused? What if the abuser had a gun or a knife and then attacked me for trying to help? So now the truth is, I'm not sure. I have my kids, I have my parents to support. If me being involved affected their lives and or my livelihood, would I? So an exhibit broke it down like this. You have enablers, those who benefit. In this case, local government, politicians, and police. Then you have your perpetrators that plan and carry out acts of violence, in this case, the KKK. Upstander, they speak out, offer assistance, intervene to prevent abuse, often at great personal risk. They are often targeted for violence or death. I try to share pictures on Facebook, and I have to say, we had our itinerary, and there was, I think I know famous, whatever, historical names, and then Viola Liuzu was on the itinerary. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I have no idea who that is. So I was really glad that I learned about her. Turns out she was a stay-at-home mom from Detroit, Michigan. She was watching all the civil unrest, and she was like, no, we have to do something. So she took her car, left her husband, her 5 kids, drove down to Alabama, and people were marching, so they marched there, then how are they gonna get back? So she very kindly, offered to give rides back and forth. And in one of those drives, the Ku Klux Klan assassinated her, shot her in the head, and she's died. That wasn't the end of that, because they were burning crosses on her front lawn in Michigan. They were shooting into her house. If her kids walked down the street, they would yell and berate them. They actually needed security at their home for 3 years following the assassination, because it was just, people knew and were, really upset. So going back to the enablers, perpetrators, upstander, ordinary society. Those are people that can either be upstanders or bystanders. We all know what bystanders are, those who stand by and do nothing. And by looking away, they can even appear to support the perpetrators. So why? Why do people stand by? Fear, of course. I don't want to get hurt, I don't want to get killed. Personal gain, that could be like politicians or what have you. Blind obedience. You have your leaders and your followers. People they'll follow even if they don't agree. And prejudiced, those who just listen to all the propaganda and buy it. And then those that don't know what to do, because they don't think that they can make a difference. So visiting all these historic sites gave me perspective. Everything on TV looks larger than life. The Pettus Bridge it's just a bridge. The Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, it's just a church. And Rosa Parks was just a woman on a bus who was pissed off. So as I was saying before, I went on the Black Lives Matter march, and it was actually here in Laverne. I don't know if any of you guys went. And the driving force was a Girl Scout friend of mine. Her name is Grace. And she was just watching, and she saw George Floyd get murdered, and that really pissed her off. So she set up a meeting with the Laverne City Council, Police Department, Fire Department. They worked together, they mapped out the route, scheduled a couple speakers. We were led in prayer prior to the walk. And they had a police presence to manage any possible mayhem in Laverne, really. They even provided water for walkers. I was surprised, not sure why. There were folks who took the time to stand on the corner, showing their sign, yelling, "All lives matter." Like, we know that. That was not the point. So overall, that day, it was a lovely day of community, respect. It was a family-friendly event. We all felt good, expressing our frustration and being able to model for our kids. Did my Girl Scout friend manage this on her own? Nope. She wasn't the only one that was pissed off, but she took the initiative to gather like-minded persons to voice their frustrations. The march was a couple years ago, but at the Civil Rights Museum, there was a sign that made me think. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Overall, it was a very eye-opening and thought-provoking trip, and I personally wanted to thank everybody who donated and giving me the opportunity to participate in this experience and learn as much as I did, because again, you read it, you hear it, you think you know it until you're there. So I go back to, would I do what Viola did? Would I leave my kids, jump in my car, go down and help? I don't know. I would love to think that I would, but I don't know that I would. But we have a community, and if we work together, like-minded people trying to make a change, I could definitely be part of that. Thank you.
Our final meal together was in downtown Atlanta at the southern restaurant called Eats. We ordered jerk chicken, mashed potatoes, pasta, collard greens, black-eyed peas, cornbread. It was delicious. The conversations were full, and so were our bellies. And towards the end of the meal, we had to abruptly scatter because, ironically enough, a protest against law enforcement had formed near where we were parked. And officers were putting boots on cars in an effort to tow the cars that belonged to the protesters. One adult from our group stood watch and stopped our vehicles from being booted and towed. Church, we live in a time where enslavement has morphed into mass incarceration, where voter disenfranchisement still exists, where lynching happens under the pseudonym of racialized violence, where education and housing inequities are still prevalent among us. While our public school system would have us conveniently believe that the civil rights movement is over, it's not. The Southern Poverty Law Center had a mantra, which is on my shirt today, and it reads, "The march continues." Let us leave this place with a spirit of courage and a steadfast commitment to continue the march. Amen. We're so glad that you listened to the message today. If you're looking for an open and affirming, peace-loving, and justice-seeking congregation, consider visiting us for in-person worship on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. We'd love to meet you.